Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll be waiting for others to join us. Let's give them 3 minutes and then we can get going. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be starting in 1 minute, that is 2:10. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box. Tell us where you're joining us from. Are you a parent? Are you a caregiver? Are you a guardian? Do you work with youth? Are you a young person? Are you also a teenager or an adolescent who saw this poster on social media and are joining with your parent? Tell us if you also work in the CSO place. Karibu, and just introduce yourself, and we'll start in a minute. Asante. So I'll begin by running us through the program. My name is Maryanne Muhoro. The Gender, Peace and Security Officer at the Youth Agenda. Youth Agenda is a youth serving organization, and we've been working with youth across 3 different pillars. We have the economic pillar, we have the political pillar, and we have the gender, peace and security pillar. And across these pillars, we've been working with young people across 15 different counties with our member organizations. In terms of today, this discussion is quite critical because we are in the second lockdown, and Nairobi is among the 5 counties that are facing cessation, and children are at home, teenage girls are at home, teenagers are at home. So how do we ensure that teenagers, children are protected from all forms of violence? So this discussion is really timely for that purpose. So to start us off, I would like to welcome the CEO of Youth Agenda to just give us opening remarks and tell us more about what we do at Youth Agenda, and just welcome you to this webinar. Victor, are you there?
Yes, Maryanne. Okay.
Please introduce yourself and tell the audience what we do at Youth Agenda. Karibu.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Maryanne, for the introduction session. First, my request to the participants is you allow me not to put on my video because I don't want to find myself trending after this session. My background is not that good. So first, I just want to say welcome and thank you to the participants for honoring our invite despite their busy schedule. I understand all of us have other engagements, but still you've managed to get time just to join this session we are going to have in the next few minutes. I also want just to say, introduce the Youth Agenda organization. And before that, I know Maryanne had already mentioned my name, Victor Nyongesa, who is currently the CEO for Youth Agenda. So briefly about Youth Agenda is a youth serving organization that has been in existence for the past 24 years. And we focus more on building young people's capacity to engage in political, social, and economic opportunities that are available for them. So in terms of political, we are keen on young people participation in politics. Politics, when I say politics, we are looking at electoral processes and even post the elections. That is in other governance matters, in participation in budget, in planning, and other existing opportunities. We are also keen on young people engagement in policy formulation processes, that is at the national level and even at the county level. On economic part, we are keen on building young people capacity to be economically stable. And under this, we are keen on changing the mindset from not only just relying on white collar jobs to us thinking of being creating jobs for ourselves and even for other young people in our society. We go ahead to equip young people with knowledge and skills on the digital skills needed to boost their businesses, and even look at provide linkage to existing financial opportunities and markets. We also have a third pillar that is keen on gender, peace, and security, and that's where this session is anchored. Under this, we are keen on various matters. We are looking at gender equality. You know, for many years, we've been talking about gender equality. And in most cases, we tend to forget that as we speak about women inclusion, as we speak about men inclusion, we tend to forget that category of youth. So us as an organization, we step in to provide that angle in terms of pushing for gender equality and in terms of, again, addressing matters on SRH among adolescents. And like I said, that's where this session is anchored. And of course, the topics has already been shared. Still within the same pillar, we are keen on the issue of peace and security. You know, for many years, vijana tumechukuliwa kuwa we are the agents of, we are the perpetrators of crime and all those negative things. But still, for us, we find that still there's room for us to change that narrative and have a generation that is on the forefront in championing for peace, at the same time in addressing insecurity matters in this country. We have a cross-cutting pillar that's on knowledge generation, and under this we are keen on research, studies, just to paint the real picture of young people in this country, to inform internal planning and also inform our partners and even the government and development partners. Basically, that's about Youth Agenda, but this session is going to be moderated by Maryanne Muhoro, who is our Gender, Peace and Security Officer, and also an expert in the topic we're going to have today. Then a group, there are a few ladies who are experts also in this topic. I believe Maryanne, after my introduction, Maryanne will take over and introduce them officially. Thank you so much, and welcome to this session. Maryanne, the meeting is on. Please proceed.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you for the brief presentation. So I'd like to walk us through the program today. So during today's session, we are covering a couple of topics. And these topics are about children and adolescents. So our first topic will be safeguarding children from violence at the household and community level. So what can you do as parents, as guardians, and as caregivers to care for children at your own level, at the household level where you are? So we'll have our panelists, Wanjiru Mbogo from the Action Foundation, taking us through that. And we'll have Child Online Safety by Maryanne Kawira. Maryanne has been working with Usikime. She's a psychologist and has been working with children in psychosocial support for sexual gender-based survivors. We also have prevention and response to violence with a bias to adolescents and girls and boys. Wanjiru has been working at the Action Foundation with adolescent girls living with disabilities. So she'll be able to demystify for us how we can prevent and respond to violence with a bias to girls and boys. We then have adolescent girls' experiences during the COVID-19 lockdown and school closures. So we have a girl rights champion, Joyce. Joyce is on the call, and she's a youth advocate for Plan International. And the elephant in the room is adolescent sexual reproductive health knowledge and awareness during the pandemic. We all know we are in a pandemic within a pandemic, and what that means is that we have teenage girls. Imagine a whole school of girls who are pregnant, like 700 girls who are pregnant. So the person who will be taking us through that is Venoranda Kuboka. She's the founder of Youth Changes Kenya, and she's a sexual reproductive health champion, and is also a child and youth therapist. And lastly, we have a position paper on teenage pregnancies and our stand as an organization, collaboratively with Venoranda and the top 35 under 35 sexual reproductive health champions, on where we stand on teenage pregnancies and our recommendations to the government and the key stakeholders. And at the foot of it all, we have parents and guardians on this call. We'll have a Q&A session. As we move on, I'd like to request that the audience uses the chat box to type in their questions, and Winnie will read them through as we continue throughout the session. So Winnie, we have the first presentation from Wanjiru Mbogwa. Wanjiru, are you ready? Wanjiru? Wanjiru, are you there? So
yeah, just give me a minute. Maybe I contact her. Just a minute.
Okay. So we have Maureen. Maureen, are you there? All right. I'd like to take this chance to request that you use the chat box to ask any question, and Nanjira is back, to ask any question that's related to today's topic. You've seen the projection of our program. I'd like us to use the chat box to ask any question. Wanjiru, are you able to proceed with the presentation?
Thank you very much, Maryanne. Yes.
Yes.
So I request to have the presentation. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mbuvi. I work with the Action Foundation, where I'm the Programs and Partnerships Coordinator. I'm glad that you have made the time to join us. And for us, a wonderful afternoon, discussing issues that are pertinent to us and the young people at large.
So, Wanjiru, maybe you can give us a brief of the work that you do at the Action Foundation as you continue with the presentation. Take it away.
Oh, thank you very much. Sure. So today I'm going to be talking about our work around safeguarding children from violence, and in particular about the topic for today, we'll be looking at the household and community levels and issues of safeguarding children. So next slide, please. So I'll talk briefly about the Action Foundation. So the Action Foundation is a community-driven youth-led organization that was established in 2010 and registered by the NGO Coordination Board in Kenya. So in regards to our work at the Action Foundation, we work with communities, organizations, local and national governments to end exclusion, discrimination, and violence towards children, women and girls with disabilities in marginalized areas. And these marginalized areas are predominantly urban informal settlement and also rural areas. At the Action Foundation, our mission is to build inclusive and resilient communities where children and young people with disabilities can thrive. And we envision a fully inclusive society where children and young people with disabilities and realize their maximum potential. So in a nutshell, we work to promote the rights of children and young women and girls with disabilities, working in the areas of health and being, inclusive education, and women and girls empowerment. So at the Action Foundation, as part of our work with children with disabilities and also with schools in the urban informal settlements of Kibera, Kawangware, and Mathare, we run a project known as Tuwalinde. So this project is pegged on issues around caregiving and safeguarding of children with disabilities. So the goal of the project is to ensure that we realize increased enrollment and retention of children with disabilities in community schools, and also promote responsive caregiving, and also ensure that these children with disabilities receive the right kind of support. They are safeguarded from issues of violence, and also their rights, able to realize their rights. So as part of the Tuwalinde project, we implement together with our implementation partner known as CENDI, that is Center for Enterprise Development and Enterprise Development and Innovation, who spearhead our safeguard component for this particular project. And this is a project funded by Comic Relief. Next slide, please. So I'll go right in and talk about issues of, children and adolescents, and all matters to do with violence against children and also adolescents. So when it comes to the concept of being a child or childhood, you find that in different contexts, the concept of a child or an adolescent varies. So you'll find that in some cultures, adulthood is not defined by age, but rather by the onset of puberty. That's where we have discussions or issues around adolescent health, or even behavioral aspects of adolescence. So when it comes to children, and in this case, adolescents who fall in this category, you find that the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child define a child as every person below the age of 18 years, unless under the laws applicable to the child, majority is attained earlier. So you find that are some countries that you'll find adulthood or adolescence, the onset of puberty defines adulthood, which can be even at age 16. Next slide, please. So I'll be talking about violence against children. And like I have said, I want to look at adolescents as children, since they are within that age that is considered below 18. So when it comes to issues of violence against children, these are all forms of physical or mental violence, injury and abuse, neglect, or children treatment, maltreatment, or exploitation, including sexual abuse. This is as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the year 1989. So next slide, please. So here I'll be talking about violence against children, and in this case also teenagers included as young adolescents. So it is shocking, and I have to say these are very, very disturbing statistics that a staggering 1.7 billion children experience violence each year, and every 5 minutes a child dies as a result. This violence can take any form. So you find that violence takes the form of sexual exploitation and abuse, the issues around trafficking, the issues around physical and humiliating punishment, harmful traditional practices, including early marriages, female genital mutilation, and also child recruitment into forces or gang groups. So there are a lot of ways and forms that violence against children can take. Next slide, please. So you find that when it comes to violence against children, there has been a record of very devastating long-term impact on children. It can be at home, in school, online, in institutions, at work, and in the community. So very context specific, because different children or different teenagers, different adolescents, young people experience violence in various ways, and based on the different contexts that they are in. So within a year globally, you find that about 103 billion boys and girls experience corporal punishment at home. And then also 261 million school children experience peer violence, whereas also whereas girls in the same age category, that's about 15 to 19 years, report experiencing sexual abuse. And here I have to say that it is very disturbing that according to research, most of the young adolescent teenagers especially report that their first sexual debut or the first encounter was forced. So there are issues around violence that are very predominant in the community at the household level, and you find that there is a lot that needs to be done at the household level, at the community level, to ensure that children are safeguarded from issues of violence. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk about the concept of safeguarding. So safeguarding refers to the actions taken to promote the welfare of children and to protect them from harm. Safeguarding in particular is all about protecting children from abuse and maltreatment. It's about preventing harm to children's health and development, ensuring that children grow up with the provision of safe and effective care. You find that most of the issues around adolescent issues, adolescent health, behavioral aspects, they all stem from issues of violence. And because these children, these adolescents are or were exposed to form of violence growing up. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about safeguarding of children. So, we need to work to ensure that as we bring up children, and as we aspire them to become, young adolescents who are aware about themselves, who are going to be productive and responsible adolescent teenagers, we need to ensure that we prevent violence at the household level. How do we do this? We need to ensure that these children receive the right kind of care at homes. They are able to receive positive upbringing. We need to ensure that parents are able to are able to bring out the developmental aspects of their children by engaging in responsive parenting processes and also the practices of responsive caregiving. So building parental skills is very key. Also at the household level, we need to look and interrogate when this teenage is at home, are they exposed to any form of violence? Is there a threat to the well-being of this young child, young girl, young boy in the community when they are within the household? Because there have been issues of even sexual abuse within the households. Then there is also the issue of promoting violence-free schools. You find that the adolescent age, most young people will be spending their time, much of their time, either at home, at school, or in the community. So do we take measures to ensure that our schools are free from violence, and also the institutions? There are some children who reside in certain institutions. We need to ensure these institutions are violence free. Then when it comes to the community level, we need to strengthen community systems to ensure that we prevent and respond to child safeguarding issues. The networks, the linkages that are there in the community, are there communication channels? Do we have community health volunteers, the local leadership being able to take up issues of violence and abuse to children and to young people? And there are measures to ensure that the right channels are used and these children are able to receive the right kind of support. So thank you very much for that. And I'm hoping to continue engaging with you, Santisa.
Thank you so much, Wanjiro. I'd like to ask if anyone has a question for her to type it in the chat box. The questions I've seen so far are towards teenage pregnancy, and they are also about, they are all about teenage pregnancy, re-entry program for girls who got pregnant. So if you have any question for her, please type it in the chat box. Wanjiro will also be coming back to talk to us about now adolescent girls and the work they're doing. They have a program called Kuboka, so she'll be speaking about the work they're doing in protecting girls and adolescents, preventing and responding to violence for these young girls. Thank you so much. I'd like to call on Maureen. Maureen is going to take us through child online safety. If you have any question about child online safety, kindly type it on the chat box and Maureen will be able to answer it. So Karibu Maureen, as I said, Maureen works predominantly with Usikime, and she's a psychologist by profession, and she's been offering psychosocial support to children and survivors of GBV as Usikime. Karibu Maureen, tell us more about what you do and take us through child online safety. Karibu.
Thank you, Maryanne. Thank you for having me today. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can, Maureen. We can.
So I will quickly try to set this up. Okay. So my name is Maureen Kawera. I am a counseling psychologist, as Maryanne has introduced me. The topic of child online protection or child online safety is a topic that is still a bit new to the field of GBV that we are in Kenya right now. But slowly we are acknowledging it, and there is an NPA that is being worked on by the State Department of Child Protection. So it's an area where we need to continue to work on actively and talk about, because it's not something that most parents and caregivers acknowledge, that our children might be at the risk of online sexual exploitation and abuse. So it is important for us as parents, as caregivers, and even as siblings, to acknowledge that we need to be more proactive when it comes to online protection of our children. So one thing we need to realize is, with COVID-19, there is a great increase in the number of cases that have been reported on child online exploitation and sexual abuse. That is why the numbers have spiked, because the movements were limited. So most of the perpetrators now turned to online. Most of them who use children for pornography and for the child sexual abuse materials, they now switch to online, and that is what has led to the increase of the cases being reported. The other challenge is trying to arrest these perpetrators is a challenge, because this is something that is done online. There are so many loopholes in our laws when it comes to online safety and what the law says. And then if the person is not in one country, is in another country, live streaming becomes a challenge to arrest the perpetrator. It is different organizations, Interpol and local police for different countries, trying to work together. So it's a challenge to arrest the perpetrators, which now makes the need for us to be proactive in learning about child online safety as parents and as stakeholders more dire. Because if our children are at risk, then it is now upon us to know what we can do to protect them, what we can do to educate them on the right way. But let's first understand what child online safety is and what online sexual exploitation is. Then we can now delve into that. So I'm just going to Wanjiro has covered most of my introduction, so I will not repeat. She's talked about child abuse. She's talked about the perpetrators, the main perpetrators of the children. 50% of them are normally close relatives, people who are well known to these children, community members. These are neighbors, family, friends, peers to these children, teachers, and on rare cases now, that's when it is a stranger. But most of the time it is someone who is well known to this child. When it comes to online exploitation, the difference with this is the perpetrators now, them not being close to these children, they now do what we call online grooming. And online grooming is where the perpetrator tries to establish a relationship with this child, tries to become their friend, tries to know more about them, but with the end goal of offline sexual contact with this child. Or even if it is online, it will be to encourage them to send videos, to send photographs of them naked, for them to now to use this as a means of exploiting these children and to sell this material online. So that is what happens when it comes. That's the difference between the offline sexual exploitation, where the child is abused by someone who is close to them, and then the online one, where this person presents themselves as a friend to this child, and then we have the crime being committed of the sexual exploitation. Online child sexual exploitation and abuse really has no age limit, but most of the survivors are between the age of 8 to the age of 17. Those are the largest number of the survivors. We have to acknowledge that most of these children might not have phones themselves, that is phones that they've been bought for by their parents, but they may have access to phones with internet through their parents, their siblings' phones, their caregivers, the house managers, the caretakers who look after them, the caregivers who look after them when the parents are not there, and the cyber cafes. The cyber cafes are one of the main ways these children access internet, and it is something that we really need to have a broader discussion and an in-depth look at when our children go to the cybers. Do we know what happens? We have cases where the cybers, the back of the cybers is used for live streaming of child pornography. So this is something that we really need to take caution as parents and even as stakeholders. So I will go straight to indications and signs to look out when a child might be sexually exploited on the internet, or signs that they might they are being groomed by a perpetrator. This is a child has a change in character. Suddenly they have either a lot of interest for online sites, or you find they have they're being very secretive in what they're doing. If they have a phone that they own, they are secretive with their contacts, with who they're talking to, with who their friends are. And then they start having friends who are not within their area. If they live, for example, if they live within, let's say, for example, an estate like Kayole, so they start having friends in Buruburu, they start telling you they have friends in Ngong. These are not friends they've gone to school with, these are friends they've met online. So it is always good to know who your children are talking to, and get to understand the kind of relationship they have with them online. Then they want to go meet their friends that they've met online. They have increased use of the phones or going to the cyber. And for you might think, it's okay, the child is just going to the cyber to play a game or to study. So it is good to have those conversations with your children and ask them, if you meet a friend online, what do you people talk about? How do you interact with them? What information do you share about yourself? So this is part of the education we're trying to teach the parents and the caregivers, and also the children, on how to be proactive when it comes to interacting with people online, and how to be careful with the information they share. It is sad that most parents believe if their children do not have phones, then they have no access to internet, then they are not at the risk of online sexual exploitation, which is wrong, because they, at this point, with the research that has been done, so many children can access internet even without using their own personal phones or their parents' phones. They have neighbors who have phones, and some of these neighbors are also perpetrators. So the risk is very high, and it is the reason why we are having this conversation of child online safety and understanding what happens and how this child is groomed. Most of the time, the perpetrators do not present themselves as adults. They'll either present themselves as also children online, or at least young adults between the age of 18 to the age of 22. So that is the age in which the perpetrators use to present themselves to these children. So we have encouraging these children to take inappropriate images and send it to them. There's those who say, who convince the children, if you send the images, I will send you money. So when these children realize that they can get money through doing this, and not realizing that the images they're sending is being sold, is being shared, is being passed on to other sources, is also a challenge, is also one of the challenges that we have in explaining and teaching these children that they have to understand that this is not another teenager you're talking to. Most of the time, the person on the other side of that computer or that phone is an adult, and is someone who is doing this as a form of exploitation. The other risk is when the child is being groomed for child trafficking. This person will present themselves as a friend and listen to the child, and if the child is having any challenges at home, they will want to come closer and share with them and be there for that child, grooming them slowly by slowly for them to now tell them it is what you're going through is a lot. Would you want to come from that situation to something else? The child is able to now give their location or even follow through to where this person is, and that is a risk of the child being trafficked for sexual purposes, to be sold as a sex slave, which is the worst case scenario in these cases. Something else I would want to touch on is when you realize the child might be undergoing sexual exploitation, you have to be very careful on how you approach the matter, because if this child is not willing to share exactly what is happening, it might seem like you have resolved the situation. If the child had a phone and you take the phone away, it might seem like you have resolved the situation, which might not necessarily be the case. So it is advisable to approach the situation in a very objective manner and talk to the child in a very calm manner for them to be able to open up and share with you, and for you to understand who they're interacting with online and why they feel free to interact with this person. And if you can also, if they are comfortable introducing you to these friends of theirs online, so that you can be able to get to the bottom of what is happening in that interaction. Also, if your child gets to learn that, or if you as a parent or a caregiver get to learn that your child is being sexually exploited, we advise that you go and report such cases. And it is very important for you to report the accounts that are being used, for that information to be taken down by the police, and for you to report this case, but also for you to let your child and take your child for therapy, because this is a form of abuse. This is a form of exploitation, sexual exploitation on your child. So it is advisable that the child goes for therapy. That way they are able to heal from what happened. They're able to also not have the feeling of I put myself out to be exploited sexually, and to blame themselves and to live with that guilt. So it is advisable that we take our children through therapy, for them to go through the healing process after the sexual exploitation. So like I said, this is still a topic we are still getting to learn and getting to talk about in our field of gender-based violence. But it is very important that as parents and as caregivers, that we acknowledge that this is a problem that is with us right now. It is part of the new normal, where children have access to online, and it is necessary for them to have access to internet, to learn and to continue exposing themselves to the ways of life, even not here, but even to other cultures. But it is also a risk. That is why it is important for us to teach them, for us to talk to them, and for us to educate ourselves on how we can keep our children safe. As parents who might have given our children phones with internet, or their laptops with access to internet at home, it is important for you to have that discussion with them. It is important for you to have parental control, the same way you do on your TV. It is important for you to do it on what the child can access online, and filter out what they can access, what they can search, and who they can interact with. If you allow them to go through social media, what are you allowing them to learn? So Maryanne, I want to hand it over to you, unless there are any questions.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. So I see comments from Sadiki, and he said this is very important, a talk to primary and secondary students. It's crazy out there, gosh. And then he continued to say, at Mary and Maureen, we have 47 counties. What is the way out? What is the best strategy to make sure information percolates to the grassroots? How do we get information to the grassroots? So how do we get information about child online safety to the parents in rural places, at the grassroots areas? He also says, very informative session. Do we have data for all the activities, e.g. how many children have been abused countrywide via disaggregated data? So I hope you can answer that. It's on the chat. So maybe we can start by tackling the question, how do parents at the grassroots get to receive this information and learn how to protect children?
Yeah, we are actively trying to reach out to parents at the community level through the NGOs and the CBOs on the ground, through teaching them through social media, forums like this, through Youth Agenda, and also hoping when now at least the country is opened and we're able to access other counties, for those of us who are locked within the 5 counties, if we're able to access other counties and be able to go to the ground and teach them. The other way is when schools open and we're able to have the parents come back, we're able to have those forums and to talk to them. But Sadiki, like me, I am open to have this conversation in any forum you might have, be it online or offline, for us to continue have the word out there and for us to continue teaching the parents and also the children, giving them the right information, not only when it comes to online safety, but also when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights. Yes, but when it comes to the next question on data, like I said, getting the data for this has become a challenge, but we are still working on it. We are still working together with the ministry when it comes to coming up with an NPA on online child sexual and exploitation protection on children, amongst other stakeholders. So this is something that is still being worked on, and we hope we will come up with an action plan that will serve our country when it comes to online protection.
Thank you, Maureen.
Yes.
I hope, Sadiki, your answer has been answered. I mean, your question has been answered. My apologies. We have another one from Salin Duta. She says, very scary, especially for parents. Is there a way we can get the recording so we can share with some adolescents who are not online at the moment? So Duta, we are streaming this on YouTube, and so I can share a link that you can share with other parents, and you can download the recording and share with them. Winnie, I don't know if you're able to share. Let me just share it on the chat box for you, Nuta, and then you're able to just share it with other parents and show it to adolescents that may be within your space. Maureen, thank you very
Yes.
much. Maureen also suggested that she shares her contacts and her email on the chat box in case someone would like to reach out to her and talk further about psychosocial support, child online safety. And there we go. She has posted her contacts on the chat box. Please feel free to contact her. And thank you so much, Maureen, again for taking us through child online safety. Thank you so much for honoring us with your time and expertise. Asante.
Thank you, Maryanne, for having me. For anyone who might have any other question on the topic or anything else on GBV, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Maryanne.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next part of the session. And on this part of the session, we are going to be speaking about now adolescents. And we're going to also hear voices of peers, teenagers, and their experiences in this lockdown and during the pandemic. And Wanjiro Mbogwa is back again to take us through the session. Wanjiro, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Maryanne.
Thank you for taking us through the second session. Please go right ahead and talk about safeguarding adolescents. Winnie, you may project the screen for her. Asante.
So thank you very much, Maryanne. So I'll be talking about prevention and response of gender-based violence, and especially for adolescent girls and boys. So be pegging this on our work, the Action Foundation, which has involved working with young adolescent girls on issues of ending violence against girls with disabilities specifically, because that is the group that we work with. And I'll also touch a bit on the instruments that are currently available for that our nation, and also how can we ensure that we prevent and respond to gender-based violence, and also issues of abuse and violence at both the household and community level. So next slide, please. Also, just a bit of background about our work in promoting, the dignity of women and girls and promoting their agency. We work with young girls, adolescent girls, and our work, especially with the young girls, involves working towards end exclusion, discrimination, and violence that women and girls with disabilities face in marginalized areas. Like I had said earlier, a presentation, I had talked about working in the settlement specifically, and here is part of our work, and why we do what we do is because we realize that there's a gap in issues around addressing violence against women and girls specifically with disabilities, and in the world, the global population suffer various of these countries, with this accounting to about 80%. Next slide, please. So Maryanne had mentioned about our program that supports the women and girls, known as. So I'd like to talk about specifically where we work with adolescent girls with disabilities, and this is because they have or exposure to various forms of violence, and this can be in the form of gender violence, early marriages, also issues around marriages. And you realize that when it comes to working with girls with disabilities, adolescents with disabilities, they face very unique challenges compared to their counterparts. Then issues around violence and abuse, even when they are at home or in school, various places or contexts that are predisposed to. So I'd like to talk about the prevailing situation, about how, with the issues around COVID and the different things that have come into play during this time, that girls and boys and also adults, live alone, adolescent, there are cases of violence, and this is true even as per the National Gender Commission. The most recent of research around that, a document that was released.
Hi, Wanjiro. Yes, okay. I'm sorry about that. Wanjiro seems to be having a poor connection. Wanjiro, are you there again? Hey,
Yes, I am.
Wanjiro.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, we just lost you. It seems you're having unstable internet. Are you okay now?
Yes, I am. So thank you. Sorry for the chat. So I'll talk about the issue around, COVID and the increased cases of violence that cuts across the boys, girls, it cuts across the spectrum. And one thing I don't to mention is that issues of gender-based violence, be it on boys or girls or adolescents, it's an issue of power. It's pegged on existing inequalities and power dynamics that come into play. So next slide, please. So our work on promoting the agency of young girls or adolescent girls is mostly revolves around building the agency and also working to violence against girls with disabilities, women with disabilities, through engagement of boys and men. This approach is specifically because we believe that for us to address violence of any form, we need to work within the existing systems, within the social structures that are already there. So we need to address issues of attitudes and perceptions that propagate violence. We also believe in leaders, the local administration, and the various people who are involved in as leaders or in any way within the community are involved in this fight. So, a way of preventing violence, we need to ensure that we work with the various administrative offices and the different power holders, key influencers, key opinion in the community are very key in ensuring that we fight this war against violence. Next slide, please. So I'd like to talk about now the recommendations on how to prevent and respond to GBV. Like I have said, our work involves working with the men and boys as change agents. So this is a practice I'd like to recommend as an entry point to addressing issues of violence, because like I've said, violence is pegged on issues of power, and it's about power relations. So the moment you bring on both the men and the boys and have those dialogues and discussions around addressing from issues of socialization, how have they brought up or how do they view issues of violence? Is it a way of asserting power by being a perpetrator of gender-based violence? What is it that has caused this person to view themselves, having some form of power over another person? Issues of masculinities and femininities, they do come into play here. So engage the men and boys. And then we also believe in building the capacity of duty bearers in mainstreaming intervention. This is also a very good approach to this, because as an instrument that is currently in use, we have the National Policy for Prevention and Response to GBV. It provides for ensuring the different duty bearers who are involved in provision of services in responding and preventing violence are able and have the means and the machinery to undertake what is expected of the various functions that they serve. Then still on the National Policy for Prevention and Response to gender-based violence, we find that it provides for equal access to health, social services, and justice for all affected by GBV. So it's very, very critical that we also ensure that survivors of gender-based violence are able to receive the right kind of support. This can be in the form of psychosocial support. This can also be in the form of, safe access to safe shelters and legal aid. So these are some of the ways that we have used as Action Foundation, ensuring that we build the agency of the young adolescent girls who advocate for their rights and become in their community, the different stakeholders, the power holders in the community to challenge issues of violence and also issues of power within the communities. So these are very key in addressing and also in responding to issues of gender-based violence. Next slide, please. So here I'm sharing our information. If you would like to get to reach out to us, we are happy to collaborate, work together, and we'll be glad to also share experiences and also best practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wanjiru, for that. It was a very simple presentation. Someone can really follow through. I don't know if anyone of our audience has a question, but there is Faraja Mugira on the chat box. They're asking, what could be contributing to the high percentage of people with disabilities in the developing countries?
One thing I can say in response to that question is that disability and issues that contribute to the various factors that contribute to having a disability cannot be in isolation. This is because there are various factors that could contribute to having a disability. It can be medical, it can be congenital, it can also be issues around some of the medication. It can be also as a result of factors such as having an accident. So that's an acquired form of disability. You were not, you didn't have a disability from you were born, but something happened to you and you got a disability. There are issues of nutrition, right from when a child is conceived, the prenatal care, also the postnatal care. So these are various factors that could contribute to one having a disability. So if you're to look at them or to look at it as an issue in isolation, then will not be able to specifically say that this is what is causing this or point out a specific cause. There are various factors, like I've mentioned, that lead to having or someone having a disability.
Thank you, Wanjiru. I hope that question is, I hope that answer is clear for you, Faraja. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you, Wanjiru, for taking us through what you're doing. Maybe a question to you, Wanjiru, and any parent that's here. If a case pops up of violence, how should parents first of all report it? Where should they get assistance from? And how can they ensure that there are no predators and pedophiles within the household? How can they do that?
Okay, so thank you for that question. I'd like to point out that when it comes to issues of abuse, and in this case, it can take the form of sexual abuse, sexual harassment. More often than not, the perpetrator is known to the survivor. You'll find in most cases, the survivors know the perpetrator or are linked or relate with the perpetrator in one way or another. These can be close relations, family relations, like uncles, even aunties. We are not looking at issues of abuse as just being predominantly experienced by girls. Boys are also at risk of facing issues of violence and abuse. So in terms of response, I'd like to say that it's imperative that a parent gets to know that a child is facing abuse, and not just knowing, but also acting and ensuring that they take the necessary measures to safeguard this child against further abuse, and also to ensure that the perpetrator is brought to book, or they give the justice that is required. So as a parent, it's important for one to communicate and have a very open relationship to with, so that to understand and know when the child is facing something, when there are issues of abuse. This parent needs to, based on the form of abuse that is, in there, that is being experienced, can be sexual abuse, they need to access services. These are health services, and also ensure that they access these cases need to be reported, and not just reported. Are there, ways or the machinery that is there to ensure that they are acted upon? So there needs to be deliberate effort to follow through. I know there are so many issues around court cases that involves abuse, violence, and parents give up, and they decide not worth following through, because it's taking time attending court sessions, or even seeking justice. This is an injustice that has been done to a child. This is a violation of their right. There needs to be clear processes, and a parent or a caregiver or the person who is following through with this should ensure they follow the process, so that the perpetrators are brought to book, because we cannot be giving up on seeking justice and still expect that we can win the fight against violence.
Thank you, Andrew. There's actually another question for you in the chat box from John Boya. So Boya asks, how do you work with girls and women with disability to build their personal confidence and esteem while building their capacities to be able to advocate for change? Maybe you can speak about, especially, I know you have the project Ibuka, you can speak about that.
Okay, so thank you for that question, and it's specifically to what we do at the Action Foundation, because they're all about building the agency of girls with disabilities, building their leadership skills to ensure that they are able to become self-advocate, advocate for their rights, and also to influence discussions and dialogues ending violence against women and girls with disabilities. So how we do this is that we adopt a model that is empowering, whereby we have mentorship of the adolescent girls go through mentorship sessions, and these mentorship sessions are conducted by older with disabilities. So there is an aspect of shared experiences, and these women then bring these girls, to bring them up to become confident, to become more self-aware, and also to advocate for their rights. So we, through this model, we are seeing girls who are, empowered, they're more confident, they can advocate for their rights, and this work had over about 100 girls in the current cohort who've been through the program, really grown and increased in terms of their knowledge around their rights, and also becoming advocates, or becoming about themselves, issues around life skills, because you need to create an element of self-awareness and build their self-esteem, where you expect to become outspoken and advocate for their rights.
Thank you, Andrew. There's a comment from Maureen. As a parent or guardian, when a child reports to you that they have been abused, always believe them. This is very important. From Arnold Gikonge, great to see you, Wanjiru and Venoranda. Wanjiru, what happens to those victims who cannot afford the costs of court proceedings to pursue perpetrators?
Okay, I'd like to respond to that question by saying that over the years, we've seen a lot of progress and a lot of, visions coming up that are geared towards ending and responding to issues of violence, and in this case, abuse. So there are various there are various services that are available and at the disposal of parents or when there are issues of abuse. There are organizations that provide legal aid. There's Kituo cha Sheria, there's Kellyn, and I can see Venoranda has also shared some of these. These are organizations that are working to promote and ensure issues of gender violence and abuse are handled. So at no point should a parent or a caregiver that they're not in a position to follow through seeking justice when when there are cases of abuse. These organizations, the likes of FIDA, Kellyn, I've talked about Sharia, there's Usikime, there's also the National Gender Equality Commission. That one is more policy level, but all this machinery is working in the different contexts to provide support to pursue justice and legal aid.
Thank you, Wanjiru. I don't know if Maureen has something to say. I can see Paul's hand is still up. Maureen, do you have something to add?
Yes, Maryanne. I wanted to touch on the initial question about
prevention.
when an incident of abuse happens at home, but I have already touched. I feel Wanjiru responded to it very well, but I was insisting, and I've said it in the comment, that anytime your child or a child in your care or a child who is known to you comes to you and they say they are being abused, the first thing to do is to always believe them. Because most of the cases where we have a child who has been abused severally, it happens the first time they reported, they were not believed. No one believed them. They were turned against, and they were talked down when this happened. So that is why I was insisting the first time a child in your care or a child who is known to you opens up to you about an incident of abuse or an incident where they feel they were violated in any way, or they tell you the way that person looks at me, the way that person touches me makes me uncomfortable, always be keen to listen to them and to follow up and to know what is really happening. The second thing I wanted to say is preservation of evidence is very important. That is one of the challenges we have with the cases that are in court, is where the evidence that is collected when the survivor goes to hospital, the pieces of cloth, any form of evidence, the way it is preserved as it is very important. But we have listed the organizations that can help with survivors who are not able to follow through with their cases. We also have some of these organizations, I know, like CREW and Usikimye, also offer counseling services to survivors. So yes. I've seen someone else has added. So yeah, let us continue working with these children in any way we can. That is what I can encourage the team that is here and anyone who will be watching this clip later on, is let us believe these children and let us work with them in any way that we can. Because like I said, and Wanjiru has repeated it, 50+% of the perpetrators are people who are related to the child survivors. Yes. Thank you, Maryanne.
Thank you, Maureen. I'd like to ask Paul to unmute himself and ask his question. Your hand has been up for a while now.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I'm Paul Mugambi. I'm a blind person.
Yes.
And it's very interesting to hear this discussion because there are several issues concerning GBV and persons with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the most important issues is that many people expect that persons with abilities are not victims or even they're not perpetrators of the violence. I'd like to hear from Wanjiru, as she come across whereby persons with abilities are also perpetrators of violence. And secondly is the issue of how we can have some more like empowering opportunities for persons with abilities so that they cannot be engaged in GBV or being taken advantage of. Because you find that most of the time is that maybe some relatives want to experiment some things with persons' abilities because of the culture, beliefs, attitudes, and you find that this one really creates another issue whereby even persons' abilities cannot speak out because of the way the perception or the way the community has continuously marginalized them. So maybe she can comment on that. And maybe when we talk about these services which are available, are they really available in terms of just availability or they're accessible? Because you'll find that many people or many organizations are more of doing what I call checkboxing in terms of activities. And then you find that even if a person with a disability, with visual impairment, whether deaf, blind, or a person with a physical impairment, might go to seek services, but at the end of the day, the services are not accessible. So we cannot just say or claim services are available, but we need to go further and establish the accessibility bit of it. Because if I'm able to go to a certain office or access a service, and whereby I cannot get any information, maybe in accessible format, or I cannot climb a particular office, then we cannot claim the service is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Wanjiru, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. Thank you, Paul, for taking the time to be part of the discussion today. So I'll talk about the issue that you've raised about the vulnerability, of persons with ability to issues of violence and abuse. So I have to say that I haven't come across a particular case where, dealing directly with the perpetrator who is a person with disabilities. But I do acknowledge, and I have to say that when it comes to issues of abuse, and abuse specifically targeting women, girls, boys, and men with disabilities, these cases have been there. There has been the rise, and this can be attributed to factors around their vulnerability. Having a disability already makes that person exposed to violence because of dependency issues. These people are dependent on possibly a caregiver based on the type of disability that someone has. So also some of the issues that come into play is that a child, or a woman, a girl, a boy with disability is abused or faces some form of violence and abuse, but the masses of perpetrators who what we have discussed earlier is that they are known to the survivors in one way or another. They relate in one way or another with the survivor. So there has been cases of they've been rampant, and persons with disabilities are very vulnerable to facing violence because of issues around having to depend on other persons within the household, within the community, and then also about the issue of access to services. we conducted a situational assessment on available services around issues of sexual reproductive health and rights and response to gender-based violence. And as we did this as the Action Foundation, and part of the findings came from that is that the women and girls who are part of that study, they say that they are not able to access some of these services. There are barriers that come to play when they are seeking these services. Some of them are environmental or even physical barriers, issues of accessibility, issues of some of the accommodations they require. For instance, a deaf-blind person going to seek services following abuse. Are there support systems and services that are available at the disposal of this person to use? Because you'll find that in most cases, there will be that barrier in terms of them sharing or getting to inform others about what has happened. So this person already feels or is put in a position where they are unable to articulate themselves and say what happened. This is also the case for and girls with intellectual disability. So most cases that involve violence and abuse are then not tackled because this seem, powerless. They can't even be able to support themselves because some are dependent on caregivers or are dependent on other people. So the issues around accessing services, accessing justice has been a problematic. And as the Action Foundation, is something that we are working towards ensuring that women and girls, persons with disabilities are able to access these services. We are trying to ensure that we have in place and provide the resources that are required, identify and work with the various instruments, other CSOs and the other government instruments, ensuring that the reporting of cases of abuse are followed up on, and justice is served. So has been an issue, I have to admit, especially with the areas that we operate in, but we are working towards ensuring that we collaborate and partner with other organizations and other government offices to push for, or rather advocate for, ensuring that services that persons with disabilities require are there and issues of abuse and violence are tackled.
Thank you so much, Wanjiru. So we were supposed to have one girl champion, and we have she's experiencing some technical difficulties. So on her behalf, we'll have Dorcas Odhiambo, who is the communications person at Plan International. She'll share with us one story at the grassroots that she has documented in terms of SRHR and the types of violence that adolescents are experiencing. Dorcas, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Maryanne. Sincere apologies for not being able to get Joyce to this call. We experienced a couple of technical issues, but I will be able to just highlight one story that has come to mind just now, or out of the interventions that we have done. Sometime last year, we realized that one of the challenges that young girls face in informal settlements is access to sanitation, bathrooms, and wash facilities. And what we realized that it may sound like a small challenge, but when you look at it, it has a very huge ripple effect. So when COVID hit, many families in the urban informal settlements were caught in between, should we provide food for our children, or should we provide their basic needs? Because, you know, many families, unfortunately, were hard hit, parents lost their jobs, and it was just a really rough time. And in informal settlements, urban informal settlements, one of the things that probably some of us know or don't know is you have to pay to access bathrooms. And so here's a situation where this father has lost their job, and the mother is probably the breadwinner now, and this adolescent girl is in this family. And it's a battle between, should we pay for you to access the bathroom every day, or should we keep this money and use some of it to buy food or buy for you sanitary towels that you need? And then we realized that it was a serious conflict that most of the families were facing. So we did an initiative at that time, an intervention, which was to help the adolescent girls access bathrooms. So it was a partnership with bathroom owners in the areas of Huruma and Mathare, so that the girls who we have worked with are able to access the bathrooms, and it gave them one less thing to worry about. It was a pilot intervention, which we are hoping to continue with, but as we are thinking through some of the challenges young girls are facing, you realize that it is even in the quote unquote simple things that we look at and imagine are, you know, very basic and easy to access, that some adolescent girls are not able to access these facilities. So that means they're not able to take care of their menstrual hygiene, or they're not even able to afford to get the sanitary towels that they need. So they find themselves in situations where they become victims, and in situations which they hadn't pictured altogether. So that initiative really made me realize that there's a lot that still needs to be done, even in the face of this pandemic, to protect adolescent girls and young women. But other than that, as we interact with them in our day-to-day activities and in our day-to-day in our online meetings, because we normally have a few sessions with them, when it comes to issues of, say, teenage pregnancies and sexual reproductive health, there's a serious outcry from the young people that they would like to have a more open relationship with their parents and or guardians and even teachers, an open relationship where they are told these things for what they are. Tell us what sex is. Don't tell us if I sit next to a boy or if I hang out with boys, I'll get pregnant. Tell us what it is. And do not, when we come to ask you questions, don't imagine that we have become unruly or that we are doing things behind your back. Just be open and honest with us and share these things with us as they are. Then a few other things that come up is, of course, we need to equip them with the correct information, because one of the things they admitted also is at their age, there seems to be a lot of misinformation that comes across. Again, the earlier speakers talked about accessing information online and the fact that children now are bombarded with a lot of information. So if you can just have more useful information online so that the children are able to know, the young people are able to know where to get this useful information to help them through their day-to-day, then probably we will have them making better decisions. When we think about issues of violence, of course, we know that during this season, there has also been a spike, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers. And I think one of the things that needs to be firmed up more than anything is proper information on reporting mechanisms. You find that many young women experience violence, but they wouldn't know where to start if it happens to them. And I feel like we need to just put out a lot more information on where do you start from if you experience violence, who do you go to, and what should you expect? What forms are you going to fill at the hospital, what is likely to happen, and things like that. I feel like the reporting mechanism is there, it exists, but how many of our young women know about it? So those are just a few thoughts that I would share, and if there are any additions or clarifications, I'd be happy to take any questions also.
Thank you, Dorcas, for sharing that. I'll just go through the chat box, and in case there is anything you may want to answer. So someone says, Boya says, in line with Mereza's question, we also need to assess our community engagement spaces in working with community structures to support in both reporting and prevention of SGBV cases, both at the household and community levels. The other comment is from Onjiro, Mereza will work with partner schools in urban informal settlements to address safeguarding concerns. We work with community health volunteers who act as referral channels within the community and provide linkages to access services such as psychosocial support and access to legal aid. The other question is Sadiki. Sadiki, I believe Dorcas has answered that question with the intervention they did at Plan International. Does poverty contribute to SGBV? Yes, it does. The access to SRHR services, the access to pads, girls and boys being manipulated because they do not get basic needs and they go to a person who can and they abuse them. So yes, Dorcas has answered that. Thank you, Arnold, for joining us, and as always, thank you for having you. Yes, poverty and economic disempowerment are linked to increased risk of SGBV. So what could be the best interventions on the same? Advocacy, capacity building, continuous work and capacity building will ensure that as communities we're able to care for parents. And what could be the best interventions on the same? Let's talk about SRHR. Thank you, Dorcas, for having us. Now we will talk to Venoranda. Venoranda, what could be the best interventions on the same? Let's start the discussion on sexual reproductive health rights and awareness. Thank you, and Karibu.
Thank you so much, Maryanne, for the invitation, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. My name is Venoranda Rebecca Kuboka. I am a child and youth therapist, and apart from that, I am the founder and team leader at Youth Changers Kenya. We are a community-based organization that seeks to promote sexual reproductive health and rights and response to sexual and gender-based violence. We currently work in Nairobi, Kiambu County, and Kakamega. And we have 4 different thematic areas that we are really passionate about. So one of the things that we do is empower girls and young women about feminist leadership. The second thing, we use soccer to be able to disseminate sexual reproductive health and rights information to girls and young women. And we also have a project that seeks to promote education around sexual violence. And basically, under that component, we provide psychosocial support to survivors. Other than that, we work very closely with key gatekeepers, and that includes volunteers, the police, clinical officer, the chiefs, just to ensure that they understand their role in addressing sexual violence in the community. Apart from that, we also have very strong component on advocacy, which we are really passionate about. So in case we have any policy review processes that are happening, we participate in those at county, national, regional, and international level, if room allows. So pretty much in a nutshell, that's who YCK or Youth Changers Kenya is. So before we begin this conversation about sexual reproductive health and rights, I know the acronym in itself is a mouthful. I want us to text And if you're not able to text, you can be able to talk and just raise your voice about this. I want to ask us a very simple question. Where did we first hear about sex? So if you're able to text that very fast in the chat box, that's going to give us some very good insights as we begin this conversation. So I can see a response from Nancy, Piers. Anyone else who would love to share? Where did you hear about sexual reproductive health and rights, or where did you just learn about sex? Maryanne saying about KBC, KBC TV, Friends. So that's Piers, Friends, okay? Any other person? Probably a last remark from someone. Friends. So everywhere here, I am just seeing Piers, friends. And that should tell us something. So one of the things that I was reflecting through as I was preparing for this session is, do we have conversations about sexual reproductive health and rights, even in our families? Yeah. And if it's there, what narrative do we propagate? Many times when we were growing up, the things that we had about sex were very negative, including, we cannot have that conversation. You are not allowed to mention your private parts in public. We cannot afford to speak about this subject. It's taboo. Please do not talk about it. These are some of the things that many of our young people, particularly girls, internalize and grow up with. Yeah. So we are in a space whereby we are really trying to address challenges, but we have to go to the root cause. Coming back to the issue I have asked right now, we have very many agents of socialization. The first agent of socialization is the family. That's where we pick quite a lot of, a lot of things from. We learn so many rules. We learn about how to navigate through the world from the family. The other space is the media, which not every one of us is privileged to have access to the media. We learn quite a lot from the media. Peers. These are the people who are very close to us. These are the people who we interact with on a day-to-day basis, These are the people who we share so many things in common. So we get to pick a lot of, patterns, a lot of behaviors, a lot of perspectives and thoughts from them. We have religious institutions, and I'll talk about the church and the mosque for those who believe in religion. These are the spaces where we get some of these, narratives about sexual reproductive health and rights and sex and sexuality in general. Other than that, we have the school, which is a major space at the moment where many of our young people get to learn from. Including, the different puberty changes that they experience when growing up, aspects of menstruations and the like. So it's very important for us to understand that socialization plays a very integral role in the lives of children, in the lives of teenagers, in the lives of adolescents. Youth Changes Kenya works in Kakamega County, and one of the counties that has been blown by the rates of teen pregnancy is Kakamega. We are in a space called Lugari, and we are seeing adolescents as young as 10 years old having children, and that is quite unfortunate. It's extremely sad. For me, when I look at sexual reproductive health and rights, it's a very big term. Sexual reproductive health and rights is comprehensive in itself. It's a package. I call it a package because one of the things that sexual reproductive health and rights seeks to outline is conversation and providing information and services that relates to contraceptives, ensuring that young women have the autonomy to decide when and if they want children. And for those who would want to terminate pregnancy for certain reasons, are able to access those services. Ensuring that we have access to comprehensive sexuality education, which is one of the things that many of us do not want to speak about. Ensuring that we talk about HIV and AIDS and STIs, prevention, treatment, and management of the same. Ensuring that we are talking about inclusion, where are persons living with disability, where are persons living with HIV, where are sexual minorities. So sexual reproductive health and rights is all encompassing, and it's quite a comprehensive package, and it covers so many things. Just to echo what was pointed out, one of the things that we've discovered as we have our trainings with our champions in the different counties is the different myths and misconceptions that are related to sexual reproductive health and rights. First and foremost, if we ask somebody to tell us what sexual reproductive health and rights is, it's either we will not get a correct answer, and this is as a result of the different narratives that are being propagated by the different opposition groups. So first, there's a lot of misinformation about what sexual reproductive health and rights in itself is. The other thing is young people do not have accurate information as it relates to sexual reproductive health and rights. And we can talk about these myths and misconceptions. There are so many. Others will tell you, if I have sex and put lemon in my vagina, I will not get pregnant. If I have sex and put coke in my vagina, I will not get pregnant. It's going to wash away the sperms. If I stay without having sex, others were telling us they will grow cobwebs. Others were saying they will rust. And these are some of the narratives that we've been trying to interrogate as we interact with the young women that we work with in our space. So there's quite a lot of myths, misinformation, and misconception as it relates to sexual reproductive health and rights. Doing a comparative analysis, look at countries like the Netherlands, where they have sex education at a very tender age, or they just have conversations about sex and sexuality from a very, very tender age. One, the rates of teen pregnancy are very, very low. Number two, young people are able to make informed decisions and choices about their bodies. Number three, the rates of STI infections are equally very, 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 very low. So it's very important for us to understand that sex education does not predispose young people to engage in sex, but it empowers them so that they are able to understand their rights and be informed so that they can be able to make the right decisions. I have a 7-year-old niece, and I was recently surprised because she knows what a condom is, and she told me she saw, and she knows what really happens, how to even use the condom. And I was looking at her, and I'm like, where did you get that information from? And she got the information from a fellow child, 7 years. She knows about sex. So one of the things that we are becoming very deliberate about is giving information in bits, just based on what she knows, and clarifying that as we go on, so that we also don't bombard her with too much information. So I'm encouraging the parents in the space, if you're able to create a safe space and be a friend to your child. So that's we have an aspect of parent-youth communication where you're able to act as a parent and as a friend at the same time. It makes it very, very easy for you to know if your child is having any form of trouble, or for your child to just come and approach you and tell you, this is exactly what I'm going through. I don't understand what I'm going through. And she would even come and tell me, Auntie, I have a crush, and we would have that conversation. So it's very important for us to have these conversations. And when children raise these conversations about sex and sexuality, clarify based on what they are telling you, so that we also don't overload them with too much information, and just ensuring that we are giving them age-appropriate information. The other thing that is very, very important, and I'd love to point this out, is the fact that we must acknowledge that the many rates of teen pregnancy in this country, 3/4, are attributed to sexual violence. And one of the things that is extremely unfortunate is the fact that conversations about consent, they're slowly coming up, but yet we haven't gotten there. We have a society that has normalized violence, and people are making so many jokes about, violence in general, which is very, very, it's actually very annoying. And these are the things that should make us angry. There's so much victim blaming. A young child would experience, it could be defilement, rape, it could be sodomy, but then they've gone through a traumatic experience and they are to blame. We really need to think about so much. I keep saying, without filters, we have a very shitty justice system. I recently received, the past 2 weeks and the past 1 month have been very crazy for me. I have been receiving calls related to SGBV every other day, as far as Mwingi County. And one of the things that I noticed is when someone called me and they told me their daughter was defiled last year, sometime in August. The perpetrator was released. They're out there, they paid 100,000, but they make appearances in court. So that tells you that our laws and our policies, we have so many gaps that exist, and these are some of the things that we continually need to advocate for. I think in terms of ensuring that we take the right actions moving forward, one of the things that I'm very, very keen about is having these conversations from home, yeah. And when we are saying having conversations that relate to sexual reproductive health and rights from home, is we are not propagating a negative narrative about sexuality. Don't have sex. If you have sex, you're going to get this, you're going to get this. How about, because I keep asking parents and challenging them, if sex is bad, why are you having it? Why are you having it if it's bad? And these are some of the questions that our young people are asking ourselves. You're telling me sex is bad, but you're having it. So why not change the narrative and use a different approach to actually state that sex has consequences attached to it, and they can be positive and they can be negative, because these are some of the things that we need to put out there. Then other than that, we also need to make sure that we have conversations about consent with children as they grow up. One of the things that we have instilled in my niece is the fact that nobody is allowed to touch her, including the touts. So when she needs to get out of her car, she is not able to. She will ask me to support if we are together, but you would hear her mention several times, "You're not allowed to touch me without my permission." We need to constantly teach children about consent. And as adults, we also need to respect consent from children. I honestly get very, very mad and very annoyed how when we go to visit little children, as adults, we are forcing ourselves on them. A child doesn't want you, but you're busy there forcing yourself so that you can carry a child, and the child doesn't want you. And one of the things that I keep asking myself is, what are we teaching this young child? That yes, I am refusing you, but then you still want to impose yourself on me, and I should not cry. I should just be allowed. I should allow myself to be carried by you, even if I don't want. So we also need to respect consent. If we are around children, we don't have to be carrying children, especially if they don't want to be carried by us. It starts from there. Other than that, we also need to make sure that we support survivors to access justice. And one of the things that we've been doing from our end, with the very little capacity that we have, is ensuring that we work closely with lawyers. We work very closely with Kelin and crew, and because we've been overwhelmed with so many cases, we've been referring them, to access psychosocial support from crew. The ones we are able to take up, we are able to, we run with that. In terms of legal support, Kelin supports us in ensuring that survivors get justice, and also just ensuring that the champions we work with on the ground know how a P3 form looks like, know how a PRC form looks like, a post-rape care form. Know that if rape defilement happens, then I need to have an OB number. I need to make sure that I go to the hospital. I need to ensure that I have been linked up in order for me to access psychosocial support. So we need to clearly redefine our referral pathways so that we are able to support survivors effectively. The other thing is we also need to break the silence around sexual and gender-based violence. It's difficult for us if we're in a space whereby we cannot, even as adults, there are people who still struggle to call their reproductive, their reproductive health parts as they are. We need to get comfortable with that. It makes it easy for us to, transfer that knowledge and information to the people around us, such that we are not having a lot of complicated issues. I will give an example. I had a case of a 4-year-old. And when they were defiled by a 16-year-old, and when the PRC form was filled out, they said that the person, I think, inserted the penis into their anus. And apologies, I know this information can cause a lot of massive triggers, so trigger warnings. But when that happened, when this case was taken, sadly what happened, the 16-year-old was not released, because the argument of the magistrate was, then how is this sexual abuse, and they were beginning to complicate the whole matter. So it's very important for us to support kids, for them to be able to name their reproductive health parts appropriately. There's nothing like, I don't know, kachuchu, kadudu, those funny names parents give to these things. If it's a vagina, it's a vagina. If it's a penis, it's a penis. We are having a lot of concerns because when children are violated, it becomes even difficult for them to even articulate what really happened and where it happened. So we need to call things as they are and name them and give them the appropriate and the proper names. Then the other thing is, I think one of the things that has helped us is we are working very closely with key gatekeepers. So ensuring that we have police around that we work with, a clinical officer that we work with, also working very closely with community health volunteers and champions that we've trained in our space. These are young women. I will give a recent story of a young girl from, again, Lugari. She's one of the champions we've trained, and after we did the training sometime last year in June, she was able to ensure a 43-year-old who had defiled a 4-year-old was arrested, and the person is currently in custody. So what I'm trying to say is there's so much power if we empower the children and teenagers and the young people that we work with. They're able to understand their rights and they're able to speak up, particularly when things go wrong. Lastly, I think it's very important for us to deconstruct the issue of masculinity. Masculinity is not violating the rights of other people. Masculinity is not us looking at someone who has experienced violence and blaming them more. We really need to redefine what masculinity is. Masculinity is respecting consent. Masculinity is allowing myself as a boy, as a man, to cry and be okay with that. Masculinity is seeking for help. Masculinity is when I'm in a relationship and things are not working out, I can walk away in peace and not just end the life of a partner. And I'm sure many of us have seen the number of femicide cases we've been having in the country. So it's very important for us to take note of these things. Sadly, we are really saddened by the rates of teen pregnancy, especially in Kakamega. It's very it's just heart-wrecking. You get the numbers, and we were making calls to some of the girls and young women that we work with. and someone will tell you, my class only has young women around 5, 6 who are pregnant. Others have not returned back to school. And in my head, I keep asking myself, so where are these men? Because ideally, anyone who's below the ages of 18 is not legally. Anyone who's below the ages of 18 cannot give consent. So where are these men? And the narrative needs to change. You are a perpetrator, you are the problem. You violate the rights of others, you are the problem. And I think these are the conversations that we need to have moving forward. Instead of even the media highlighting 50,000 girls pregnant, we need to point out those men who are violating those rights of women, as opposed to, being in a space where we are victim blaming or trying to amplify news in order for it to get prominence. So for me, I think we all have a role to play. The parents have a role to play as it relates to providing information from home. As a community, we have a role to play. As civil societies working with young people, we equally have a role to play by working together and ensuring that there's access to justice. I saw a question where someone asked, does the government of Kenya care? In my opinion, I feel they don't care. Because if they do, as we speak, we would be having a tracking system to know how many girls dropped out of school. As we speak, we would have numbers of those who've gone back to school. And as we speak, we would be having a system stating that this is the support that we are providing for adolescent and teen moms in Kenya who dropped out of school as a result of sexual violence or as a result of teen and adolescent pregnancy. So in my opinion, I feel they don't care. And hence, we need to make sure that we are holding our governments accountable. We are constantly holding them accountable for their actions. We have guidelines that relate to, school re-entry for teen mothers. Is that being implemented? Are there any barriers that we're experiencing? How are those barriers being addressed? So there's quite a lot of mix and so many things that we really need to unpack. And these are some of the things that we really need to unearth as we even discuss the issue of teen pregnancy. And my parting shot would be where we honestly need to make sure that perpetrators are held accountable. We have to make sure that they are held accountable, because with all these teen pregnancy cases, where are the men? Where are the men involved? That's my parting shot. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Venoranda, for that impressive presentation. It's true, we need to respect consent, and above all, we need to also be able to seek the consent in the first place. Maybe just to engage you a little more, Faraja Mugira is saying, wow, he has been amazed by your presentation. He's saying the way majority insist on carrying children who don't want to be carried, they're actually violating their personal space. Never looked at it like that. Thank you so much, Venoranda. Ridhiwani Sadiki asked, does climate change affect the desire to have sex? It's crazy, boys and girls get hot early enough. Which is the way out? Back to you, Venoranda.
So I wouldn't, I'm trying to process the question that has been asked. Let me just go to it. Does climate change affect the desire to have sex? Maybe if you can expound more. Sadiki, it's crazy, boys and girls get hot early enough. Which is the way out? I think it would be great to seek clarity from him. What does this really mean? Then I can be able to respond from that. But we have to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of urbanization happening. Young people have access to technology. you know, young people are more informed right now. I keep telling parents, you will be surprised the kind of content we are given by the young people. They know more about sex than Venoranda, and I'm 30 plus. The kind of content these young people have, yeah. So there are a lot of changes in terms of technology, in terms of the conversations that young people are having amongst them, because many times they get information from their fellow peers, which might not be correct, and which might not be accurate as well. So my response to this is, I feel that there are so many other factors that influence the issue of, you know, engaging in sex, not necessarily climate change, but the other factors that definitely influence the issue of sex and when sexual debut begins.
Thank you so much for that. I'd want to pass the mic to Mr. Sadiki. Seems like you have follow-up questions on the same. Sadiki?
Thank you so much, Maryanne. What I meant in my question is, you see, when you talk about climate change, things are changing. I was talking about the foods which the young people are eating right now via what our fathers and grandfathers ate in their olden days. I find that the foods we are eating right now are really, many of us are taking fast foods, are not, and sometimes they're not taking balanced diet. So for me, I think there is a hormone imbalance to these young boys and girls. And I think the other part, Venoranda has tried to respond, but it's crazy out here, because the young people, the appetite for sex for the young people is really hiking, and it is crazy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that explanation. Venoranda, would you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I would say I like giving responses to the questions asked just based on either evidence or research, to ensure that I'm giving factual information. So I haven't had or seen any research that has pointed out the correlation between, you know, the issue of the food that young people are eating and how that affects sex and sexuality, unless someone has seen that and you would want to, you know, share that with the team. That would be very good. So I haven't seen that at the moment. So I would state that it's very important for us to try and interrogate the underlying factors that influence sex and sexuality among young people, including the aspect of peer pressure because other young people are doing it, the aspect of curiosity. You're telling me sex is bad, but you're doing it. So I would want to explore what is this that you're telling me is bad that you're doing it. And we also have to admit that there are those people who are having sex. They're actually not having sex, that there are people who are being violated, not having sex, yeah? They're being violated. So we wouldn't want to also cushion them in the category of, you know, they're engaging in sex because their rights are being violated in the process, and it also amounts to a criminal offense. So it's very important for us to understand those different dynamics. I haven't seen any study, any research, so I would not state that argument is factual or based on any evidence, unless Sadiki has any research that relates to that. Then I have seen questions on someone asking about comprehensive sexuality education. And yes, to be honest, the government doesn't care. The government of Kenya does not care. We do not care for our young people. We don't care for our adolescents. And I've said that, and I've explained my reasons. For the longest time, civil society organizations have been fighting and advocating to ensure that the Ministry of Education puts in place comprehensive sexuality education in schools. But this is receiving a lot of backlash. And that's why we need to work together with parents, you know, with religious actors, for them to understand that imagine they also offer sexuality education from home. But then what we need to interrogate is what approach do they use? Yeah, because in my perspective, comprehensive sexuality education is number one, age appropriate, based on a context. So it is based on the Kenyan context. There's nothing like a Western idea. It is based on evidence. It's based on data. It's based on, understanding what do healthy relationships look like, what is consent for that matter. What options are there for me if I'm sexually active? Can I be able to access contraceptives? For example, and we had a case of two young women within our space. How best if I experienced rape, I didn't tell anybody about it. I discovered I'm pregnant. I do not want to carry the pregnancy. Then I terminate the pregnancy. Is it possible for me to access post-abortion care? And these are the hard conversations that we need to have. And also access to generally adolescent youth-friendly services. Can I get STIs? Can I get HIV testing and treatment? Is it possible for me to get access to counseling? I think it's important for us to point out that during this time, there's been a lot of increased mental distress among many of us. Our anxiety levels are so high. Many of us are experiencing a lot of depression, massive triggers. So much trauma is happening. There's so much violence around. So people are actually on survival mode, yeah? And these are the discussions that we are not having. And in my opinion, I feel like when we have structures and a government that is protecting its people by having the right policies, the right frameworks, the right laws, then we also protect the lives of our young people and children as well.
Thank you so much for that. We can not emphasize that much. And there's a comment from Fidelis Njeri. She's saying that parents should not be told that parents should be told not to be too afraid of bringing up such topics to their children. What will happen if a small girl told her parents that she's pregnant? She'd be shouted at and mostly told to go out. According to her opinion, parents should take a great role and also be open about such topics. And I think that we are quite over the time schedule that we set out. I'd like to invite Maryanne Muhoro to present a position paper on teenage pregnancy.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you for staying with us this far. I know we are really, really past time. So the last part is to present this position paper that we collaboratively put together with Venoranda. And this position paper is going to be printed out and published on our social media. We're also going to send it to the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health and all key stakeholders that are involved in the caring of children and adolescents, from the parents to health workers to healthcare providers, all of them. So I'll go right into it and we can wrap up by 4:25. Thank you very much. So I'll start. We, the Youth Agenda Kenya and the Youth Changes Kenya and Top 35 under 35 Cohort 1, Sexual Reproductive Health Champions, issues this statement in regards to the high rates of teenage pregnancies in Kenya. We'll call upon national and county governments, civil society organizations, and opinion leaders to reverse the situation and to recognize, respect, and promote sexual and reproductive health and rights of adolescents and youth. We believe the buck starts and stops with the government, especially the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. About us. The Youth Agenda is a youth-led, youth-serving organization founded in 1996 sparked by evidence of exclusion of youth in spheres of life and fueled by a passion for the total youth. We believe in a just, equitable, and progressive society in which young people fully enjoy their social, economic, and political rights. So, in collaboration with Venoranda, the founder of Youth Changes Kenya, Youth Changes Kenya is a community-based organization that was founded in 2015 to promote sexual reproductive health and rights and to address systemic issues of sexual violence among adolescent girls and young women from rural to peri-urban areas. So let's understand the policy and Regal frameworks in Kenya. Kenya has a favorable policy and legal environment to address adolescent and sexual reproductive and health rights concerns, including teenage pregnancies. The Constitution of Kenya guarantees every individual the right to the highest standard of health, which includes the right to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. Further, the government of Kenya has obligations in fulfilling optimal enjoyment of sexual reproductive health rights that stem from international treaties such as ICPD and identifies ways through which international development commitments can influence the realization of SRHR in Kenya. Further, the law protects every child from abuse, neglect, harmful cultural practices, and all forms of violence. This is also anchored by the Anti-FGM Act, Children's Act of 2001, the Sexual Offences Act of 2006, Gender Policy in Education, the Education Sector Policy, the Marriage Act of 2014, the Population Policy of 2012, the Adolescent and Youth-Friendly Services Guidelines, and finally, the National Adolescent Sexual Reproductive Health Policy, among others. The aim of the National Adolescent Sexual Reproductive Health Policy is to enhance the sexual reproductive health status of adolescents in Kenya and contribute towards the realization of their full potential in national development. The policy intends to bring adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights issues to the mainstream of health and development. The Ministry of Education developed a school health policy 2020 and guidelines for school re-entry among pregnant adolescents and teenagers, but we're not seeing that. We're not seeing teenagers being given that preference. So what is the problem statement? In 2020, according to AFIDEP, it was reported that the total numbers for the period of January and May 2020 were 1,051,433 teenage pregnancies registered in healthcare facilities across counties in Kenya. We'll put a link for this data. Some of these cases have been attributed to sexual violence, cases of defilement of underage girls, who also increased in the period of COVID-19 lockdowns and school closures in 2020, with some cases going unreported due to fears of stigma and prejudice or fear of retaliation from the wider community. We all had in Kibera someone being bailed out, people fundraising for them to be bailed out when they have raped a 4-month baby. So Winnie, go back down. So the growing lack of parental and public support for sex education programs are a major hindrance in adolescents, youth accessing sexual reproductive health information and services centered on their needs. Efforts to address teenage pregnancies and other sexual reproductive health matters are resisted by parents, religious leaders, political leaders, and other stakeholders, despite the mounting evidence that young people are engaging in sex earlier than in the past. So if you're a parent in this webinar, you know what change to make in addressing SRHR for your children. So what is our list of demands and to whom? So we request that the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology addresses the issues of the lack of an existing sex education program in Kenyan schools, the lack of information among students on sexual reproductive health rights, transactional sex for sanitary towels leading to teenage pregnancies. And what are the approaches to support utilization of ICT? We need to go back. Support utilization of ICT and other innovative approaches in delivery of adolescent sexual reproductive health information. Ensure implementation of the education re-entry policy for adolescent teenage girls who have fallen pregnant during the COVID-19 pandemic and their growing needs. Facilitate the provision of information to parents on the sexual reproductive health of adolescents within the school setup. Fund the provision of free sanitary towels for teenage girls across all Kenyan schools. Providing data on the status of teenage pregnancies during COVID-19 in Kenya, giving light to the number of teenage girls affected. And then recommit the Eastern Southern Africa commitment on comprehensive sexuality education. What about the Ministry of Health? There's the lack of youth-friendly sexual reproductive health services in some public health facilities. So the government must work towards ensuring that youth-friendly, non-discriminatory sexual and reproductive health services, including family planning services, are included as part of services to youth and adolescents. Winnie, can we move down? Winnie, scroll down, please. Winnie? All right. So let me read it for you. So the other demand to the Ministry of Health is that they ensure implementation of education re-entry policy for adolescent teenage girls who have fallen pregnant during the COVID-19 pandemic and their growing needs. They also facilitate the provision of information to parents on the sexual reproductive health of adolescents within the school setup. They also fund the provision of free sanitary towels for teenage girls across the Kenyan schools and provide data on the status of teenage girls during COVID-19. So the Ministry of Health also needs to ensure that each facility has trained medical personnel in the delivery of youth-friendly services. They need to have improved sexual reproductive health and HIV services, including training of staff, providing easy access to free family planning, supplies in private spaces, and increasing the availability of counseling. The other one is removing the financial barriers that result in the denial or delays in receiving necessary SRH services for adolescents and youth. And they also invest in collection of disaggregated data. So, to the Ministry of Labor, Social Security and Services, and Children's Services, Direction of Children's Services, National Council for People with Disabilities, and the Director of Public Prosecution. What is the issue? Sexual violence on teenage girls leading to early pregnancies and the spread of HIV, as well as child marriage and FGM. So what is our list of demands? Protect adolescents against harmful cultural practices, child marriages, child labor, and FGM. Protect adolescents, sexual violence, and provide access to justice for survivors of sexual violence. Ensure greater livelihood opportunities for adolescents in line with existing laws. Invest in financing safe houses and providing psychosocial support to survivors. To us, NGOs, SBOs, and FBOs, anyone working in this area. So the lack of SIH information for adolescents, what can you do? You can support the provision of SIH information and services to adolescents and the communities you're working with. You can build community and stakeholder support for adolescent sexual reproductive health policies and programs. You can support sustainable programs seeking to empower adolescents and transfer of knowledge. You can engage religious leaders in sexual reproductive health programs and bust myths and misconception concerning sexual reproductive health. And for us, parents, communities, the men on the panel, what can you do? The men on the webinar, what can you do? The lack of information on sexual reproductive health rights, increased sexual violence against teenage girls, and stigma on teenage girls. First, as parents, we recommend and we request you that you should cascade information related to sexual reproductive health and rights, and equip adolescents to make better decisions related to the sexuality. For boys and young men, you should be at the forefront in ending sexual gender-based violence against adolescent girls and preventing early pregnancies. Adolescents cannot consent. Anyone below the age of 18 cannot consent. So as men and as boys, please stop raping women and stop raping girls. That's be at the forefront of ending sexual gender-based violence. Would like to ask communities, church leaders, and leaders all around to end stigma and taboos related to sexual reproductive health knowledge for adolescents. And finally, we urge teenagers and adolescents, both boys and girls, to seek appropriate information about sexual reproductive health and information that can allow them to make decisions that serve them for the future. Seek information that will allow you to serve you for the future. Seek information that will allow you to make the proper decisions on your sexual reproductive health. So please leave your contacts on the chat box, and you'll be able to collect them and send this position paper to you. We thank all of you for joining in the call. I don't know if there's anyone who has something to say before we end. We have a minute to end. Thank you so much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Venoranda, to thank Wanjiro, to thank Maureen, to thank Dorcas for tuning in and sharing the expertise with us. I'd also like to thank everyone, the members of the audience. Please follow us on our YouTube channel at the Youth Agenda 254, and you will get access to all this information. We'll also send you resources that can help you build your knowledge on sexual reproductive health rights as parents, as communities, as leaders within your own localities. So thank you so much. And I'd like to end the call there if no one has something else to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Maureen, I didn't get your contacts. You can send in my email.
Yes, you can send in your email, Paul.
And in case you have a request I had made, anyone can contact me.
Yes, Paul, you will be contacted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shit.